Have you ever felt like your depth unsettles people? Like the more you think, the more you question, the less you seem to belong? You walk into a room and somehow, without saying a word, you make others uncomfortable, especially women. Not because you're loud, not because you're confrontational, but because you're clear, quiet, unwilling to play the game. It's not your aggression that makes you dangerous. It's your refusal to be predictable. And in today's world where predictability is mistaken for safety, the man who won't conform becomes a threat just by showing up. Soren Kierkegaard once said, "People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use. But you think, and that's the problem. You don't take things at face value. You question motives. You spot the lie behind the smile. You feel the tension in the room that no one wants to acknowledge. And in doing that, you tear apart the illusions modern relationships are built on. Most people want comfort, not truth. But the intelligent man, he's allergic to comfort built on lies. He can't ignore the transaction hidden inside affection. He sees the performance behind polite words. He feels the disconnect between what people say and what they really mean. Kierkegaard warned us, the crowd is untruth. So what happens when a man refuses to get swallowed by the crowd? When he takes a different road, one of meaning, reflection, solitude? He breaks the system that keeps people passive, emotionally compliant, easy to predict, easy to control. And that's why women don't fear intelligent men because of their intellect. They fear them because they can't contain them. See, the intelligent man doesn't need attention to feel alive. He doesn't need praise to feel masculine. He doesn't chase just to prove he can win. He sees the illusion in the chase itself. And when he does love, it's not shallow, it's not safe, it's honest, piercing, present. And that level of presence, that sharp, aware, grounded energy, it's rare, it's intense, it's often rejected before it's respected. Kierkegaard talked about despair not as sadness, but as a man who doesn't even realize he's lost touch with his true self. He called it the sickness unto death. And that's what society fears most in men, that they might wake up, that they might stop performing, that they might stop smiling on cue, apologizing for their depth, or reshaping themselves just to fit in. Because a man who sees clearly, who acts from truth, not approval, he can't be seduced, not by applause, not by chaos, not even by love. And when a man doesn't need to be liked, he becomes free. And when a man becomes free, he becomes dangerous. Now ask yourself this. Why do you feel misunderstood in most rooms? Why does your silence make people uneasy? It's because most people build their identity by being seen. But the intelligent man, he builds his identity by seeing. And not just casually, deeply, piercingly. And that kind of vision, it makes people squirm, especially when they're hiding. You start to notice patterns. You understand power games, emotional manipulation. You spot seduction for what it is, fear dressed up as charm. And the more you see, the less you're able to play along. You're no longer enchanted by shiny things. You're not chasing the next hit of dopamine or the next superficial connection. You're not cold. You're whole. And in a world built on confusion and performance, wholeness is threatening. Because wholeness doesn't play games. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't flinch when someone tries to manipulate it. It just is. And in dating, that presence, solid, aware, steady, is almost alien. The modern dating scene is built on confusion, on emotional unpredictability being mistaken for chemistry. But the intelligent man, he walks away from all of that. Not because he's jaded, but because he sees through it. He's not swayed by emotional chaos. He's not impressed by theatrics. He doesn't stick around just to prove he can be patient. And that's why he gets labeled, misunderstood. You're cold. You're distant. You're too intense. No, you're just clear. And clarity, in a world of noise, feels like danger. Most people aren't looking for love. They're looking for a role filler, a provider, a protector, a performer. But the intelligent man won't be boxed in. He steps out of those roles, and suddenly he becomes invisible to those still trapped in them. Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, the decision to step away from society's roles, to walk alone, to choose truth over comfort, even if it costs you everything. And it will cost you. It'll cost you comfort. It'll cost you popularity. It may even cost you love. But what you gain? Selfhood, sovereignty, sanity. The ability to wake up every day and know you're not living someone else's script. That kind of man doesn't chase approval. He chases alignment. He doesn't ask, will they like me? He asks, and once you start living from that question, everything changes. You stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand. You stop trying to soften your presence to make others more comfortable. You stop apologizing for your insight, your intensity, your stillness. And people will call you names to make themselves feel safer, arrogant, detached, intimidating. But they don't really fear you. They fear what they see in themselves when you're around. They fear what your silence reflects back at them. Because you're not performing, you're just present. And presence in a world addicted to distraction feels radical. They don't know what to do with a man who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't beg. A man who just is. Because that kind of man, he can't be bought, he can't be played, he can't be predicted. He is not driven by reaction. He is led by choice. The intelligent man becomes a force, not loud, not flashy, but steady, rooted. He speaks when it matters, and when he's silent, that silence says something. This is why you may feel alone, but this is not failure. This is awakening. You scare people not because you're cruel, but because you no longer play by the rules of a system built on illusions. You are not being avoided because something is wrong with you. You are being avoided because you are finally right with yourself.
Let's talk about relationships. Why does a woman feel uneasy around the intelligent man? It's not because he doesn't care. It's because he cares differently. He doesn't chase. He observes. He doesn't flatter to impress. He listens to understand. He doesn't respond to every emotional signal like a trained animal. He selects his reactions like a surgeon, precise, intentional, and calm. And that presence, that restraint, it confuses people who are used to being worshipped without effort. He doesn't worship. He discerns. Because intelligence, when mixed with emotional clarity, becomes spiritual X-ray vision. You see past the mask. You hear the fear behind the flirtation. You sense the need behind the drama. And that kind of sight, it unnerves anyone who's still hiding. Kierkegaard said, every person must become a self, not a mirror, not a role, not a reflection of what others want, but a self. But becoming a self takes work. It takes silence, stillness, reflection, solitude. And those four things, culture runs from them. Because when a man becomes still long enough, he starts seeing the truth. He stops chasing. He stops apologizing. He stops consuming what doesn't feed his soul. He becomes different. Want to terrify a room? Walk into it and don't seek attention. Don't laugh on cue. Don't over-explain. Speak only when you have something real to say. Set boundaries without raising your voice. Be kind without being compliant. Be romantic without being dependent. And then, just watch. Watch how people start adjusting their behavior around you. Watch how the masks start to tremble. Because people feel when a man is rooted. They don't always know what it is, but they sense it. And they don't know what to do with it, especially when that man isn't performing. That's the secret of intelligent men. They don't perform. And that is what makes them dangerous. Kierkegaard once said, "Once you label me, you negate me." And that's what society does when it doesn't understand you. It tries to label you. Is he cold? No, he's composed. Is he arrogant? No, he respects himself. Is he distant? No, he's discerning. But labeling is easier than reflection. So the world will reduce you to something smaller just to avoid facing its own discomfort. Don't let that shake you. Let it sharpen you. Let it deepen your solitude. Let it forge your path with greater clarity. Because here's the truth. You weren't made to be palatable. You weren't made to be agreeable. You weren't designed to fit into every room. You were built to stand firm in your truth, even if it makes others uncomfortable, especially if it makes them uncomfortable. That's the challenge Kierkegaard understood. He wrote, "The crowd is untruth." And yet, most men still look to the crowd for validation. They chase applause. They measure their worth in smiles, hearts, attention, affection. But applause is a trap, because it slowly teaches you to shape yourself not based on truth, but based on what pleases others. And the more intelligent you become, the less applause you will get. Why? Because you stop playing to the crowd. You stop making yourself smaller just to be liked. You stop chasing compliments and start pursuing truth. And most people, they don't clap for truth. They clap for entertainment. So when you step off the stage, they fall silent. They stare. They whisper. You scare them not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. And clarity is terrifying in a world that thrives on confusion. In a culture built on noise, your silence is disturbing. In a society that worships stimulation, your stillness is seen as rebellion. And it is. It's the rebellion of a man who has reclaimed his mind, his attention, and his soul. You don't owe anyone your confusion. You don't owe anyone your performance. The intelligent man does not explain himself to people who have already decided not to understand him. Have you noticed how people grow uncomfortable when you stop oversharing? When you start protecting your thoughts? When you don't rush to fill silence? That's the energy of a man who is no longer trying to be understood by everyone. That's a man who has made peace with being misunderstood. And that's terrifying. Not just to women, but to everyone who's still stuck in the fog. Because society runs smoothly when men are distracted, when they're addicted, when they're always chasing something. But the intelligent man, he doesn't chase, he chooses. And that choosing, that deliberate, calm, intentional choosing is power. Unshakable, quiet power. Kierkegaard called it the single individual, the man who separates himself from the crowd, not in arrogance, but in authenticity. He walks alone not because he hates people, but because most roads are noisy, and he's after truth. He's after God, in whatever form that means to him.
And here's the paradox. The more rooted you are in yourself, the more people will try to shake you. Not because you're wrong, but because your presence reminds them of everything they abandoned. Their silence, their soul, their depth. And in relationships, this truth goes even deeper. The intelligent man doesn't romanticize chaos. He doesn't confuse unpredictability with love. He doesn't worship the emotional roller coaster. He wants peace, not drama. And when he speaks of love, it isn't hormonal. It isn't about control. It's sacred. But to someone who's only ever known love as instability, that peace feels empty. It feels unfamiliar. It feels boring. But it's not. It's safe, in the most powerful sense of the word. It's real. And that realness, it threatens people who are still looking for highs, not wholeness. So they say you're too quiet, too intense, too serious. But you're not too anything. You're real. You must not dim that realness to be accepted. Don't hide your intelligence to seem more relatable. Your role is not to blend into confusion. Your role is to stand in clarity. And sometimes clarity walks alone. Kierkegaard walked that path. Alone, yes, but never in vain. He was mocked, misread, misunderstood. He walked away from the woman he loved not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Because his mission demanded solitude. And that's your question now. Will you keep playing roles? Will you keep shrinking for applause? Or will you finally become the man you were born to be? Even if that means being feared, rejected, or alone. Because the intelligent man does not seek to be liked. He seeks to be aligned. And alignment, true alignment, will cost you popularity, but give you peace. And when you meet someone who sees you, not for your charm, but for your depth, they won't worship your performance. They'll join you in your silence. And that changes everything.
Maybe she'll come. Maybe she won't. But either way, you're not waiting in desperation. You're not molding yourself to be more likable, more palatable, more normal. You're not diluting your truth just to be desired. You will walk your path, whole, either way. Kierkegaard lived that kind of solitude, not empty, but sacred. His pain became his scripture, his silence, his strength. He didn't perform for attention. He wrote for the few who could understand. And that's you now. You're not for everyone. You're not supposed to be. If you were easily understood, you wouldn't be you. So if you're misunderstood, good. If they call you cold, good. If they call you intense, good. It means you've stopped performing. It means you've stopped fitting into a world that thrives on surface-level connection. You've started mattering. Because this world doesn't need more agreeable men. It doesn't need more smooth talkers or people-pleasers or emotionally dependent romantics. It needs men, real men, who know who they are, who walk in silence, who love without losing themselves, who speak when it counts and disappear when it doesn't. Men who are so anchored in truth that not even love can make them abandon it. And if that's who you are or who you're becoming, then know this: you won't be for everyone. But for the few who can see you, you will be unforgettable. You won't be worshipped by the crowd, but you'll be respected by the rare. And most importantly,
You'll respect yourself in the quiet moments, in the hard choices, in the nights when you choose solitude over shallow comfort, when you pick truth over validation. That's what this is about. Not status, not fame, alignment. And if this message has stirred something in you, if something deep in your chest is nodding along, even if you can't explain it, then don't let that feeling go. Don't drown it in noise. Don't trade it for a little more attention or a little more acceptance. Honor it. Because the truth is, what you're walking into now is a kind of freedom few men ever taste. And that freedom will cost you. Kierkegaard said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." Because once you stop outsourcing your identity, once you stop needing permission to exist, you realize something terrifying. There's no map anymore, no crowd to reassure you, no checklist to follow. There's just you and the quiet space between who you were and who you're becoming. And most men never make it that far. They stay on the surface. They stay where it's safe. They numb the silence with distraction. They avoid the abyss. But not you. You've chosen a different path. You're staring into the abyss and walking through it with open eyes. That's why intelligent men scare the world. They feel the questions most men are afraid to ask. Who am I without a job title? Who am I when no one's watching? Who am I if I stop pretending to be what others want? And when you stop running from those questions, when you start living in them, you become the kind of man who can no longer be manipulated. You're no longer chasing validation. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone who respects your wholeness. And if she doesn't come, you won't collapse, because you're already complete. You're not a boy begging for attention anymore. You're a man walking with purpose. That's the shift. You've learned to walk away from what insults your soul. You've learned to say no, not to hurt, but to protect your peace. You've learned that love is not a transaction, it's a mirror. And the woman worthy of your depth, she's not the one who flatters your surface. She's the one who sees your silence and chooses to stay anyway. Maybe she'll show up. Maybe she won't. But you're not shrinking to be chosen. You're expanding to be met. That's what Kierkegaard meant by the knight of faith, a man who lives from the inside out, who doesn't need validation to believe in his vision, who walks quietly, purposefully, without needing anyone to clap. The knight of faith doesn't need to be seen. He sees. And that inner light, it burns brighter than any spotlight ever could. So if you're in pain, good. If you feel alone, good. If you're questioning your place in the world, good. That's the cost of becoming real. You're walking through the fire, not around it. You're facing the loneliness, not numbing it. You're turning toward the silence, not running from it. And yes, that silence will hurt. There will be nights when you wonder if something is wrong with you. There will be days when the world feels too shallow, too loud, too fake. But those are the signs you're on the right path. You're waking up. You're shedding the illusions. You're no longer entertained by what once thrilled you. You're no longer satisfied by what used to keep you numb. You are not too quiet. You are not too deep. You are not too intense. You are becoming. And in a world built on fragments, wholeness will always feel threatening. But that's okay. You weren't made to be ignored. You weren't made to blend in. You were made to become the kind of man this world forgets how much it needs. A man who can't be moved by lies, not even the ones he used to tell himself. Kierkegaard believed every man is called to something deeper. Not more status, not more image, more truth. And that's your path now. Not to know more, but to become more. More still, more discerning, more real. And yes, it will be lonely. But in that loneliness, you will find a kind of peace the world cannot offer. And when you finally look in the mirror and recognize yourself, not the performer, not the pleaser, not the puppet, but the man, you'll realize every sacrifice was worth it. You'll stop looking for someone to fix your silence. You'll start loving the stillness. You'll build a life that doesn't just look good from the outside, but feels good from within. And the ones who can't meet you there, you'll let them go, with grace, without bitterness. Because the man you're becoming, he's not chasing anyone. He's not chasing anything. He's choosing, deliberately, powerfully. And in that calm, focused choosing, he becomes untouchable. Not because he's arrogant, not because he's cruel, but because he is finally whole.